to another episode of the Beyond the Device podcast, where we explore the life-defining moments that shape careers within the medical device industry. We are particularly interested in understanding how someone's personal experiences, challenges, or pivotal events influence professional journeys. And as we progress through the conversation, we will eventually land on the question, what is the one defining moment or experience that changed everything and set you on the path that you're onto today? Today's guest is someone that's worked across pharma, medical devices, and data protection, spanning global healthcare organizations through startups and engineering-led innovators. Across hundreds of products and technologies, he has developed a strong reputation for navigating complexity, but in recent years has focused his time heavily towards AI and machine learning in healthcare. What fascinates him is that AI doesn't quite fit neatly into regulatory or technical boxes. It's evolving faster than frameworks around it, and in many cases, healthcare is still figuring out how to properly define and apply it safely, and he thrives in that grey area. But today, we're going beyond the job title and into the thinking behind their choices. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Paul Fletcher-Dyer to the podcast. Hello.
Thank you very much. Absolute pleasure.
Welcome, Paul. So if you have listened to any of our podcasts before, you know that we always go back to where your story began. So if you can just tell us a bit about your early years and what shaped you growing up.
Early years would be back in Wootton Bassett in Wiltshire, a very, very long time ago now, unfortunately. Did the normal going to school, which doesn't exist anymore. Well, in the same context, going to college, which again the buildings don't exist anymore, which seems to be a follower, which is a bit of an old one. And I was trying to figure out what to do, as we all do at those ages. And we did the work experience 2 weeks job, which you always do. And I had a week in a lab where I ended up getting the best report in the class for working in the lab. I absolutely loved it. And then the following week was a week in an estate agent, and I got the worst report in the class. So it kind of indicated that I was not built for that kind of thing. I always had in my head I didn't want to work behind the desk, especially in the early years. Obviously now I do. But I went looking for lab work, and fortunately I was picked up on the year in industry scheme for Abbott Laboratories in Kent. So I moved away down to Kent when I was just shy of my 19th birthday, I think it was. And I was there for a number of years, and they actually put me through my degree, which worked out really nicely. But yeah, I didn't even know this sort of field, which I'm now in, existed, to be honest with you.
And usually that is due to exposure to something technical, or something's piqued your interest in that field, whether it was a person, a teacher, like just something has triggered that. So can you place that, like just even going back before that work experience?
I think it's
what made you so good in the lab?
I always enjoyed sort of, for want of a phrase, working with my hands, doing something, seeing a result come off an action. So even when I was sort of way back before schools and colleges, it was cooking, for example, mixing stuff together. When I was in the college and the school and everything, it was always the science-based stuff. Like I said, seeing that action as a result of the inputs that you put into it is what I always enjoyed. I couldn't do math. I wasn't particularly good at the math side of things because I couldn't understand how to apply it to real-world situations. Statistics I was absolutely fine with because I could see the point, but pure math, no, just could not get my head around it. So it kind of indicated that I need more context for things.
Yeah,
I needed to do something where I could see something as a result at the other end.
Yeah. What did your parents do?
My father was sort of pipe engineer, stroke plumber. He did industrial and he did local. Started off in lead working, and then, like I said, went into the plumbing on the other side. And my mum was NHS nurse and then went into occupational health. So both very kind of sort of doing jobs is the way I phrase it. And it's been the same with other members of the family as well. My grandparents and everyone else has always been doing jobs.
And you've had the hands-on side of your dad's roles and the healthcare side of your mum's roles, but actually growing up, did you ever know what the medical device industry was? Was it just that
No,
that first role at Abbott?
I had absolutely no idea. I mean, I understood pharmaceutical science and I understood working in a lab, but medical devices, regulatory, applying the standards and stuff, none of it. I kind of fell into the role when I moved away from Kent with my wife, and from there I've just sort of expanded into this field that I didn't even know existed, and I still find it interesting now, which is I'm kind of fortunate in that regards.
Definitely, yeah. And it's an industry that's continuing to innovate and change, and now with everything AI, which Nathan said in the intro, you're immersed in that world. There's just new things to always focus on. But again, going back to those early days and what brought you into this field, were there any key role models in that stage of your life that guided you on this path?
I suppose my father was the one who really kind of guided me, or told me it was okay to go and try something new without doing, without knowing what the result was going to be. When I got the offer to work down in Kent for Abbott Laboratories, it was a 3-hour drive away from where I was, just outside of Swindon. I've never been further away, kind of thing, and I was literally moving away for a job which I didn't even know if I'd be any good at. And his response to me was, "Sometimes you just got to try." Yeah, there's no issues with trying and failing. You just got to go and do it sometimes, and that was quite a thing. Sometimes you do need to leap and see what happens afterwards. Sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't, but you'll never know if you don't try. And I think that was the right attitude there, to be honest with you.
And did you do that knowing that I guess you had like the safety net of home? Because I think at that age you can go and try things, knowing that maybe you could go back if not.
There was definitely that aspect of it. I mean, the worst case scenario would be if it didn't work out for the year, I could go back and do something else.
Yeah.
And yes, having that safety net did help. Fortunately, with Abbott, I interviewed under the year in industry, but they actually offered me a job instead of the year in industry placement. So it was a kind of different setup. And like I said, I was there for 7 years, but I would never have considered even looking at them that far away. And yeah, like I said, sometimes you gotta jump and hope.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you've also got to be quite realistic about it. Of if this doesn't happen, then what am I going to do? And in my case, the worst case scenario was I'll go back home and I will try and find a different way.
So how do you manage that now then? Because as people grow up, you almost become your own safety net, but you also become the safety net for others, like your partner, your children. So taking those risks is maybe harder, but actually that's where growth happens. So how do you rationalize that now?
I'm very, very fortunate with my wife, Julie. She, if there is an opportunity to try something or to look at a different field, then we will talk about it. We will say what are the risks, what are not the risks, and we will look at it. And we will, in some cases, it's a case of I've got to try this. That's worked both ways in our partnership. Mm-hmm. And I'm very, very fortunate in that regards to be able to do that. So, yeah, it's a bit of a difficult question for me to answer because I've not been restricted. Does that make sense?
Yeah, well, it's a nice position to be in, isn't it? It's but you've set that up because you've got somebody to lean on and support on. It's down to communication and trust.
It is, and that is the perfect wording. And like I said, fortunately with Julie, that we both trust each other, and we both, if someone, if one of us wanted to go off and say, look, I need to go and try this, then we will find a way to go and do it. And I'm very, very lucky in that regards. At the same time, the responsibility side of what happens if it doesn't happen, and in the worst case scenario, if that doesn't work, then we'll have to go and look at a different way of doing stuff. And again, that's what we do. But again, we talk it all through, and it's a joint decision to make.
Yeah,
and we're very lucky with that.
And Paul, the focus of the podcast is like building up to key moments, key turning points, pivotal times in people's life. And usually it's when you look back that you can identify something as being that moment. For you and your career, your personal life, is there anything there that stands out?
I suppose the biggest one for me is in the early days of medical device land, shall we say, that I came to realize that sometimes you can do everything right, but the result isn't what you want it to be. I think there's what's the phrase that Captain Picard used? Sometimes you can do everything right, but it doesn't work out the way you want. That's life. It's a bit of a harsh way of looking at it, but it's also quite a realist way of looking at things. So, and that I was fortunate enough to experience that quite young in my industry career, for want of a better phrase. So that's actually changed the way I approach a lot of things moving forward with work, with my career. And whilst at the time I didn't appreciate the nuances of that or the impact it would have on me, I'm now actually quite grateful that experience happened to me, because the person I am now and the way that I approach work or other things has been quite heavily influenced from that event.
And what is the event? Would you mind sort of describing actually what happened?
I think it's quite suffice to say that in a work tasking, shall we say, that with multiple people, that whilst I may have done absolutely everything correctly, other people hadn't, but the negative impact of the outcome was put on me rather than on other people. Why that happened, I don't know. I spent a lot of time trying to figure that out, and ultimately it doesn't actually matter. It taught me a lot about responsibility, and I think that's the biggest learning I took from that. I am responsible for my own actions, and if something goes wrong and it's my responsibility, I will take responsibility for that. I will, put my hand up, say, yes, I made an error here. This is how I fixed it, and make sure I don't do it again. I also take that approach with my teams. Everyone makes mistakes. There's not one person in the world who hasn't made a mistake. But the important thing about it is knowing that you've made that mistake. Yep, I've made a mistake. This is it. That's what I've done. This is how I fixed it. And then what happens if you what do you put in place to make sure it doesn't happen again? If you're making the same mistake multiple times, then there's obviously something else that needs to be addressed. That lesson was a hard lesson to learn. But like I said, it's actually it's sort of guided me a lot more now in my career since that happened. I took that approach when I was consulting, for example. You are responsible for that part of a project. You are responsible for managing those teams over those sites. And you take that responsibility, you own that responsibility. If they make a mistake, then you have to own that responsibility as well. But again, you fix the problems. The outcome is the important bit to make sure that you've actually done what you should have done. And ultimately, it's a case of, have I done everything in my ability to do that job, do that role, or do that tasking even? And if you've done the best of your ability, then great. If you haven't done it, then it's a case of, well, what should I have done differently?
And how
hopefully that's kind of answered the question. I know I kind of rambled a little bit on that one.
Yeah, and almost taking the blame for other people's actions is not an easy thing to do. Right. So how were you feeling at the time?
At the time, to be honest, it took a very long time for me to understand that. There was a lot of introspection. There was a lot of feeling very, very down. Why has this occurred, and what did I do wrong to cause it? Fortunately, I was able to speak to, obviously my partner, family. I actually went and spoke to a professional about it as well. And I was very fortunate enough to be able to do that, and I am grateful for that. But like I said, at the time, for maybe a year, 18 months after that event happened, my confidence was properly knocked. You know, is my knowledge base just not good enough? Is the way I do things not right? You know, that kind of quite negative cloud, for want of a better phrase. And it took time to sort out. It took time to work through that. But again, now I'm kind of glad it happened because of the things I've taken away from it now. And it's a bit of a weird thing to say you're grateful for something that negatively happened way back then that really kind of you struggled with.
You'd be surprised at how many people are glad these things happened. I don't know what the stat is. It was on it's basically like it was Mo Gaudet was talking about like the happiness equation, and he it's a theory he come up with, and it was like 85-90% of people wouldn't change the trauma or the event based on the actions that were taken following it, and then what that's led to. So you're actually in the majority to feel that way.
I completely agree with that. I mean, the person I am now is the culmination of everything that's happened in the past. And I'm quite happy with who I am. I actually quite like who I am now. And if those things didn't occur in the past, then I wouldn't be happy who I am now. So I take that, I embrace it. But again, that's not an easy lesson to accept, especially when you're kind of first starting out in an industry such as the industry that we're in. Which is why it took so long. But from that happening, it pushed me to try different careers again. I went out consulting. I went out and worked in fields I'd never worked in before. So the knowledge base I have now, the ability of what I do for my job now, is directly impacted from those events back there. And like I said, I'm quite grateful for those.
And what would you say is the kind of standout behavior change or thing that you do today that's come from that event?
It's talking. And I know that's a bit of a wide thing to say, but it's talking. I encourage anyone who works with me, works for me, or in any context, if you want to talk about something, we'll talk about it. There's no topic is off the table. Nothing goes further unless you want it to go further. Because the thing that happened back then is that I was bottling a lot of stuff up. I didn't want to burden people with how I was feeling at that time, and that's why it took so long to not get past. That's the wrong phrase, but to not even deal with. I'm trying to think of the right, to move forward, shall we say? So if anyone wants to talk about any topic, the case is that this is the rule. If you say I need 5 minutes to talk, then I'll drop everything and you will have that 5 minutes to talk. I think the only rule is if I'm in the meeting with the CEO, I can't do that because, kind of a bit of a difficult one to get out very quickly, but it's the next thing on my topic is we will talk. So I'm very kind of, anyone can come along and just say, look, can I just talk about something? Not a problem. Let's just do it. And I also do that with those people, but I also go and talk to my CEO as well to say, look, this is what I'm struggling with at the moment, because bottling that up, A, doesn't help the company, and B, it definitely doesn't help me. So I'm quite open with that, but at the same time, my responsibility side of things is I take responsibility for myself, for my team. But when I was asked to go and do a consulting job one time, I was asked to go and review a team for capability, and I was quite uncomfortable with it. And I said, well, I'm not overly happy about this because you're asking me to go and assess people, and they're like, well, yeah, we are, but we need an external point of view. And I said, well, look, fine, this is the rule that I will have with you. And it was two CEOs, they were joint CEOs, and I said, I will go and do this for you. However, I will let you know if there is any deficiencies in the team. But if it turns out that you two are in the wrong, then I will tell you that you are the ones in the wrong here. And I've taken that forward as well. being able to have the confidence and responsibility myself to say, hold on, I'm not going to hide something from you if you've done something wrong. Sorry, my light's just gone in. And, you've got to take responsibility for your actions as the CEO, as the board, as the department manager. So if you don't know what's going on, then how can you fix that as well? So, but then it's not an easy conversation to have, but that's part of my job, is to have those conversations. But then that goes to talking, it goes to openness. There's the professional side, there's the personal side, but it's all about the talking.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it sounds like
the first time you have those conversations will always be difficult. It's just something you train, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. Yeah. It is, and I've gotten better at them. Definitely, I used to go in quite brash. Hold on, we've done something wrong here, and this is how we need to fix it, and rah, rah, rah. But it doesn't actually work that way, because you don't know what's going on their side as well. So say, look, here is a problem. We need to talk about this. What is the best way forward? And that's how you do it. But it's that give and take, but someone's got to take that first step.
It sounds like what you're describing there, and the confidence that you have in yourself now versus the lack of confidence that you had in that 12 to 18 months after that pivotal moment. You can see how far you've come.
It's chalk and cheese, or whatever phrase you want to use. It's looking. It's kind of difficult to see who I was back then now. But again, I wouldn't be who I am now if it didn't happen. So that's why I'm grateful for it.
And that's kind of what this podcast's about. I think often people don't stop to reflect at how far they've come, and this is trying to give the space to do that. We've, I guess, touched on the subject already, but should we talk about some mental health stuff?
Sure.
I feel like we've started this already, but going back to that period, and you said maybe you were bottling stuff up, and then you saw the benefit of talking, and you've gone on this journey to where you are now. But just on the subject of mental health and what that means to you, can you just talk about that a bit?
That bottling up that occurred, that very negative thinking that occurred, kind of led me down there was the anxiety aspect of, am I doing the right thing? And from anxiety, it's quite an easy hop, skip, and a jump to feeling very, very down all the time. That kind of, I'm not going to say it was depression, but it was very dark time, shall we say? It was very, very black. It's not a difficult thing to talk about, but it's a very difficult thing to explain where I was. My experiences are my experiences with that. How I handled it or didn't handle it until I started talking, for example, is not how other people would categorize what happens if they were in the same situation. So that's what I try. When a colleague come up and said, look, I'm having a bit of time, I said, look, I know where you're coming from. I've been through it. This is what happened to me. That dialogue is, this is what happened to me. There was a week in the middle of it where I can't even remember. I was signed off ill kind of thing, and all I remember is bed and sofa. I couldn't tell you what I ate. I couldn't tell you what I watched on TV. I couldn't tell you if I read a book or did anything. But that was me. That was the bottling up. That was me just sort of imploding a little bit. And like I said, talking about it, even if you don't know how to put the words together, sometimes just even starting to talk about things is the way forward. And like I said, I was very fortunate with my partner and the professional help I got. And it was a CBT course of all things, actually. Okay. Cognitive behavioural therapy, I think it was. And it was the gentleman whose name I can't remember now, which is awful of me, there was a lot of listening, but also a late case of, well, how can you use this moving forward? What, can you look at this from a different perspective? That I was very fortunate about, because then it started letting me think about what happened and how I was feeling and what to do to move forward with it. And sometimes you need that not stranger's voice. You need that outside voice sometimes, because
Absolutely.
yeah, it was. I feel kind of bad for my partner because Julie told me exactly the same things, but I wasn't hearing what was said until someone whose voice I didn't know said it. Does that make sense?
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's a very strange thing. Sometimes you just need to be, yeah. Instead
It's
of having
like
a big
on
flashing
that you
black
can
and white
even.
sign, you need a flashing red sign or something. It's very strange.
I've had it before where a company will reach out and say, look, we need a contractor. Okay, well, what's the project? And they'd be like, right, well, I've been telling the CEO this needs to change. They won't listen to me, so I'm going to bring someone in external and tell them the same thing, and then they'll listen to me. And it's just the same here, isn't it? Really, it's just
A little. It was,
unbiased,
and I've actually been that
opinion.
contractor as well, so I know exactly. I definitely know that one as well. It's very strange. But like I said, that's why I encourage anyone to sort of. It doesn't matter who you are, just sort of come and have a word, or just say, "I just need to unload for 5 minutes."
Yeah.
There's the phrase I use is, "It's not personal; it's professional." If you need to scream and shout for 5 minutes about how something isn't working or how something is so complicated and you just need to vent, then come and vent to me. It doesn't matter. You can scream, you can shout, you can do whatever you want. Apart from possibly, start slapping me with a wet fish or something. But it's professional. I don't take them as personal attacks. They're not, you've not let me do this or anything else. It's purely professional. So that's the rule I have. Anytime, whatever you need to do, just come and do it.
And you reflect on that period. You've got that week where you don't remember much other than the bed or the sofa. It's almost like that was when you were in the eye of the storm, and you maybe can't see a way through. Because when you're in it, when you pass it, you look back and go, "Wow, how did I manage that?" But you almost just do.
Yeah.
And I think the phrase that I always think about in these times is "This too shall pass." The bad times, the good times.
I'm forever grateful for Julie for me leaning so heavily on her without realizing I was leaning. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
And I'm forever grateful for that. I truly am. But yeah, like I said, looking back, I'm actually quite grateful it happened because of what it's given me now. But it's taken a long time. It's taken a very long time to get that point.
Yeah, so hard to think that when you're in those moments, think I'm going to be grateful for this one day.
Very much so. Very much so.
Yeah, but that is the mindset you've got to have.
Yeah, you do. Yeah.
So if someone was facing their own turning point or life challenge, maybe similar to yours or maybe just completely different, just how would you give advice for somebody to approach those times?
It's a cliche one, but it's a case of find someone to talk to. It doesn't really matter who you talk to. Sometimes it's just about starting a conversation, even with yourself, but you need to say it out loud. Friends, family, a co-worker, hell, even a stranger on a bus sometimes. I think it's the bottling up was my biggest thing that was not healthy. Because I didn't feel like I could talk to anyone. And that was where that was my biggest problem. So my advice is, it's not an easy conversation to have. It's not even easy to sometimes start the conversation, but you will be grateful for starting that conversation. Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah. Like I said, sometimes it doesn't matter who you talk to. Sometimes it's just about saying something out loud.
And I think with that, you said at the earlier in the podcast, you like who you are and the person that you've become, and I think that's so important. You've got to have that relationship with yourself first, so then you become that person that other people can lean on in those times, and you've got your confidence back, so you do trust your opinion on things. And I think that relationship with yourself, that conversation, it's the voice in your head, isn't it? Because the voice in your head can be so negative, but you're not your thoughts, and you can control them. So it's just controlling that narrative in your head first.
It is. And the other thing for me, which ironically it's only just popped into my head, is that I also know that there's always something to learn as well. I'm never going to be perfect. I'm never going to be able to say I know the answer to every single question that comes up. But what I do know, I'm confident in. Does that make it's that kind of, again, that's a difficult lesson to learn as well. Saying you don't know something is sometimes very, very hard to say, especially in a professional setting.
I know too many consultants that say they know everything.
Oh, I never said that one. It was a case of, I'm not entirely sure. I need to go and have a look at that. I'd much rather say, give me 5 minutes, let me go and do double check. Yeah. Instead of saying, yes, this is exactly what you've got to do, and it turns out to be utterly the wrong thing to do. I mean, when I was out consulting, there is this whole kind of feel that you have to say that you know exactly the answer to every single question there and then, but it doesn't work. You have to be able to say, look, I need a couple of minutes here just to, either refamiliarize yourself with something. Because, I mean, how many standards are out there? How many different regulations out there? You can't keep all of that in your head. You can't understand every single nuance. You can't understand how the difference between the EU versus the UK sometimes. It's this kind of thing. You cannot keep all of that information. And sometimes you do need to take a step back and say, I need to go and just double check something, because ultimately, as a contractor, your duty is to that contract, to deliver that output. And you've got to do it to your best of your ability. So whilst I'm not contracting at the moment, my taskings are such that, we need to get this done, we need to get this done, we need to get this done. And I will do that to the best of my ability. And if it's a case of I need to take some time just to go over this quickly or to come back to you, then that's what I will do. Because ultimately, at the moment, my duty is to those taskings and to the companies I work for. So I wouldn't have had that approach or that level of approach if things didn't happen the way it did in the past. So again, I'm quite happy that happened, because from a professional standpoint, it's given me that ability to say, no, I need to take 5 minutes here.
So rather than looking back, let's look forward. And what's in store for you personally, professionally, maybe the same thing? What's on the table?
There's where I currently am, I'm managing the QARA functions of 2 different companies at the moment, which is a challenge in itself. But I still think that AI is gonna make much more. Sorry, fumbled up. The AI is still going to have a massive impact moving forward. So I still keep I still try to keep as much up to date as I can with the AI stuff, because it can actually impact where I currently am as well. But where I currently am as well, I'm doing much more corporate QARA. So understanding sort of impact of QARA and EBITDA and everything else like that at the moment is quite an interesting lesson for me to be learning. It's something I've never done before. So that was part of the job when I came in. It's a case of, we need you to do this. I'm like, well, I actually haven't done that before. Are you okay with this? And they're like, don't worry, we'll teach you. That was a learning opportunity for me. And in the future, who knows what opportunities will come up, basically. The one thing is that I don't take this, maybe this is a bit of a naive thing to say, but I don't take a job role or anything else just because I need another job or I need to try something different. I've been asked to sort of interview for companies and everything in the past, and I've actually researched a company. It's like, I don't really see much for me there, but also I'm not entirely sure of the intentions of the company. I want to work for companies, and I'm fortunate enough to at the moment, where I can see what they're doing. I can see what the impact they're trying to make. And that's quite a nice position to be in. And I'm not in a position where I have to sort of just take whatever job comes along. Something that interests me and something that I believe in the company. What's going to happen in the future? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I mean, I still think AI does, like I said, will have big impact, but at the moment it's very stagnant.
Yes.
The problem with the AI stuff at the moment is the analogy that AI is moving so very quick, fighter jet, and yet the regulations are like an iceberg. They're so slow. And there is this massive gulf at the moment between how to regulate something which is moving so quickly that you can't actually do it, where, there was the case of IEC 62304. They wrote a draft to update the latest version of 62304, and they realised it was out of date before they even finished the draft. I mean, it kind of says a lot right there and then, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. But industry as a whole is changing as well. Everyone's trying to find a quicker way through, or the ultimate goal is helping the patient at the other end, and that's something I do firmly believe in. But there's a lot of questions about data, and I think that's a very scary area, to be honest with you. I think it's going to get to a point where there's going to be a crux point where things are going to change in the industry as a whole. And I think we're approaching that probably in the next 10 years. What that change will be, I don't know. But it feels like something's building. It feels like something's, I
was going to say, if you were to predict 5 years from now what your job as a quality regulatory person will be, what do you think the fundamental change will be in your day-to-day?
I think there's going to be a lot more management of expectations. And by that, I mean, from a global QARA standpoint, every country has their own requirements. I mean, even the blocks have their own requirements. Everyone wants to sell their products globally, and, as they should, especially if it's, something's going to have a real impact. But having so many different disparate systems, so many different disparate certificate requirements and everything else is leading to such a burden on QARA that there's something needs to happen in that industry to smooth the way, for want of a better phrase. A lot of people talk about the use of AI in QARA topics, in writing reports and everything else. And it's a bit of a difficult one, because using AI to write a report, for example, how can you demonstrate that AI has been suitably trained? It's the same with healthcare. An AI system cannot diagnose. It's not legally allowed to diagnose a condition. And that's because only a qualified, trained HCP can diagnose a medical condition. So until an AI is classified as a person and is then suitably trained to be a person, can it then diagnose a product? So every single AI out there cannot diagnose. It's not legally allowed to. But the way people are getting around that is to say they put all the inputs into an AI system, and the output is a list of possible topics, not ranked to anything else, just a list of possible causes, because that's how you get around that question, because then the ultimate decision is made by the HCP. From a QARA standpoint, you could write a tech file using AI. You can write a CER or anything else using AI, but you're in the same position. How can you prove that AI is suitably trained? And the answer at the moment is, if it's reviewed by someone who is suitably trained in QARA, then what's the difference between an AI writing a paragraph and someone who isn't trained writing a paragraph? But it's a massive gap in the market, in the market, in the industry, is that there is not this clear-cut definitions. There is not this clear-cut, you can do this, you can't do that. Once we get to that point, not just for QARA, but for use of AI in industry, any industry, that will be the turning point. And I think we're getting there, but I couldn't tell you what it's going to look like. It's either going to be a blanket case of the regulators or the politicians or whoever saying around and say, we accept AI and we will use AI wherever we want to use it, but without having any kind of backup to prove that AI is safe, for example. Or it'll be look, it's still around, you can still use it in these contexts, but we're going to define those contexts, but they haven't done that yet. I mean, globally, there's not even an accepted definition of what AI is. And how can you even regulate an AI industry if you can't globally agree what AI actually is? Hopefully that's kind of answered the question. I know I kind of went off on a bit of a tangent on that one, but I do think there's going to be more everything's going to get to a point where there is going to be a crux and there's going to be a definite shift. But what that shift is going to be, I don't know at the moment.
I think we're in a unique position in the fact that, well, we recruit people in compliance roles, quality regulatory roles in a highly regulated industry. And our view of AI and the view of the people like yourself of AI is, how do we regulate it? How do we protect patient safety? How do we do this in the right way? How do we keep up with the speed of it? And I just wonder, those on the side of developing AI or in other industries where there isn't that red tape or compliance or patient safety, that this just isn't even on their radar. It's just, how cool is this tool and how quick is it, and how efficient is my day job? So we're almost looking at this very differently to a lot of other people and a lot of other industries.
Very much so.
Not that that's wrong. I think it's the right way to look at it. And you can be optimistic or pessimistic. Depends.
You can be, and I completely agree with you, and that's where it is. I mean, from your sides, I mean, do you use AI to screen CVs, for example?
Yes.
Yeah.
So,
and the tools that we use now compared to what our job was a few years ago is making us more efficient, but it is also just, there's so much data that we still need to check. It's that same thing. You can use the AI to do a certain amount, but we still have the experience to check that,
and it comes down
like
to,
you described.
It's nuance. I mean, if you use AI to do keyword searches for skills, for example, but then those are keyword searches, but the nuance is someone may not have used that particular word, but instead of using 3 words to actually explain exactly the same thing.
Yeah, I think the way that we would do this, because I know so many people whose experience is better than their CV reflects. But if you still have the conversation with them, and I'm sure you've been on plenty of calls yourself over the last year or two with these AI note takers. Now they're brilliant because it allows you to focus on the conversation, and you know everything that is being said will be reported back, and then you can really start to say, well, I've questioned this person in quite a lot of detail around this subject, and that doesn't really come through in their CV, but I've got that information and context now, and I can then match that up with the conversation that I've had with the client and kind of pair the two together. So it definitely does help.
It does, very, very much so, and I don't disagree with that in the slightest. What I would disagree with, though, is that the summaries of those AI note takers are sometimes not the right summary that you want to take away from it.
That's why you download the full transcript.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly.
Create your own notes.
That's the difference. Is there are people out there who would take that summary as rote instead of saying, is this actually correct? And I think that's the biggest challenge across all industries, is that reliance.
I've had it where there's a specific piece of experience or something that's needed, and it'll say, that person's got it, and I was thinking, I've not seen that, and they've never mentioned it, because can you just tell me exactly where you got that from? Well, they haven't explicitly said that, but it could be, and it's not right. So that happens a lot. So you cannot rely on, it's not at the right level yet to do that.
No, it isn't, and that's where we come back to the use of AI in QA or in laws, or all the cases where there's been lawyers who have submitted into court cases pieces of transcripts which have been done by AI, and it's been completely incorrect. Or, summary judgments made in using AI, but it's quoted cases that didn't exist or stuff like this, and it wasn't checked. And then you just get this case of that person where it happened in the court. Where is their responsibility? They obviously didn't check this. They obviously didn't make sure this was accurate. They just depended on it, and then it turns out to be completely wrong. And from a professional standpoint, you look, let's face it, kind of stupid. So again, it comes down to the responsibility, like where you use these things and where you don't. And that goes into how I work. AI is used for some things, but not for everything. And if it is, I was having a discussion with a couple of team members last week about a very, very small nuance in the MDR kind of thing regarding Class 1 reusable devices. And I'm not going to go into it because it is in the weeds level nuance. And we used an AI to say, what is the difference between these two minor categories? And it gave us a response as a starting point to have a discussion. But if we were going to write a position paper or something on it, we wouldn't rely on that. We would say, that's our starting point. Now let's go off and confirm that information from over here. And that's the way that I think it should be used, at least at the moment.
At least at the moment. I think that's a valid point. Right, so to wrap things up, and thank you for being so honest about your experiences and your journeys and where you are now. If you were to summarize one key lesson from your story, what would it be?
I don't know. I'm not entirely sure. I suppose it's be open to talking, but take responsibility for what you do. Laying the blame on other people, on other things, on other events is not the right way to go. Especially if you just want to discount what you're thinking at that time, or say this is so unfair. Sometimes things are unfair, and that absolutely sucks. Sometimes it's a case of, did I do something wrong here, and then this is a learning experience. But talking, I think it comes down to talking. You do not know what's happening behind. What's the phrase? You don't know what's happening behind other people's eyes. I think it's some kind of random thing I read somewhere. So, and sometimes that also means you're wrong. And sometimes you just need to say stuff out loud. It doesn't matter to who, to start trying to understand things. And I think that's my biggest lesson is the talking, and then I take responsibility for my actions and the consequences thereof. Yeah, I think that's probably the two. Those are the two big ones.
Yeah, and it's I guess validation for the whole reason for this podcast. Just allowing people to come on and talk, because we see the benefit. We've learned so much from having these conversations. We're always so grateful to people coming on and sharing their stories. So thank you again.
Oh, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you. And I have enjoyed listening to all of these, by the way. I am now a subscribed avid listener, shall we say. And I do find it very, very interesting to listen to everyone's perspective. So thank you very much. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, good to hear. And on that point, if you are listening to this and it's made you reflect on your own journey, please reach out to myself or Nathan about coming onto the podcast in the future. And in the meantime, please like and subscribe, and we'll be back soon with another episode. Thank you again, Paul.
Thanks,
Thank
Paul.
you very much, gentlemen. Thank you.